I've been investing now since 2011, which was the end of the last GFC. Now, what's been crazy to me as an investor during that time is that even though the performance of property around the world has been phenomenal, the sentiment and the fear in the market has consistently been ridiculously negative. Now, obviously, the property market isn't always rainbows and sunshine. It is one of those things that does go up and down and does vary significantly year to year. But we believe, looking at the past and all of the incredible things coming in the future, that there is a great opportunity for young and middle-aged Australians to completely set their futures up using property and Australian property as an asset.
Now, they say history has a funny way of repeating itself, and while we're not indicating that these growth levels in the past are going to continue into the future, it does give you some insights as to how well the Australian property market has performed in the past. So if we look back over the last 100 years worth of data, which John Lindemann actually did this, he realised that the average Australian property has seen about 11% growth per year over the last 100 years. Now, if we look at the last 50 years, Simon Priestley recently did an article which indicated the average property in Australia has seen about 8.5% growth per year over the last 50 years. Now, if we look at that into each individual market, there's certainly been some winners and some losers. Now, Homely recently did an article as well where they looked at 46 years of history, and what that indicated was Brisbane had averaged about 9.7%, Sydney and Melbourne at about 9.5%, and then Perth had performed by about 8.2%. So the four major metro markets in Australia have historically performed the absolute best here in Australia.
You know, in terms of the longer term future, the Australian government is forecasting that within 50 years, we're going to be sitting at over 60 million Australians. Now, when you break down the ABS's data, over 75% of that will be between the Sunshine Coast and Geelong in Melbourne. So Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane getting the lion's share of that population growth.
And not only is the population growth expected to be in those three geographical locations, this is also where the majority of the infrastructure growth is going to come from. Because those areas have so many people moving to them at the moment, this forces the government to spend a lot of money on upgrading the roads, the train lines, the hospitals, the universities, and also improving the central business districts in all of those different locations.
Now, another reason we think property is going to do extremely well over the next 15 to 20 years is just the reality that people need somewhere to live. There's many other asset classes in the world that are completely dependent on sentiment, how people are feeling, and a store of value, where property is shelter. On top of that, we live in one of the most stable countries in the world, not just geographically, but politically and economically as well. We've got the most strict banking policies of any developed country in the world. Pound for pound, we've got some of the most incredible natural resources of any developed country in the world. And to the rest of the world, this is why so many people from India and Asia are investing in Australia right now, is you've got a government with assets under the ground that isn't squirreling all of that money away for themselves, but actually putting it back into roads and all of that key infrastructure that Simon mentioned.
Yeah, we really got to thank those comets and asteroids that hit the planet millions and millions of years ago for all the natural resources that we got under the ground. And, you know, the other good thing about Australia is the fact that we have a lot of diverse employment opportunities. You know, you can be a miner, you can work in the public sector, you can work in finance. There's so many different employment opportunities, which enables people to follow their passions and earn a really good income in this country.
Another one of the reasons that we really like property is it has been a great hedge against inflation longer term. Now, if you're interested, you can go through our YouTube videos, and I did 50 years of inflation versus interest rates versus property prices recently, another video that looks into it. But basically what we found is that every time interest rates were high, property price growth was also extremely high, as were the rental jumps. So for me, when looking back at the longer term history, there's really only property and commodities that seem to provide any sort of meaningful hedge against inflation without the true value of the asset washing out. And that's why we're so heavy into property at the moment.
And the eighth reason we love Australian property in the long-term future is due to the ownership structure that we do have here. With 70% of the entire property market being emotional owner-occupiers, and also knowing that about 30% of those owner-occupiers have no debt on their current principal place of residence, and then another 30% have actually got an LVR below 50%. So they've got a significant amount of equity in their portfolio.
You know, I really like that personally because it creates more stability in the market. Because property isn't such a liquid asset, it's way harder to buy and sell. And that means that when markets do come down 10% like they did in the last year, or go up 10%, you just don't see that transactional activity that you do in stocks, crypto, gold, and other markets like that.
Now, there's no denying that Australian property has been one of the safest and best assets to invest in the past. And moving forward into the future, with that population growth, having constant infrastructure projects coming to the market, which is creating more jobs and creating more opportunities for people here in Australia.
Now, for those of you out there looking to use property and to get into the market in the next 12 months to not just hedge against inflation, but to create long-term choices and financial freedom in your future, then Simon and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. Please jump over to www.pumpedonproperty.com and click that free strategy session button. We can talk about where you are today, where you would like to be longer term. We can educate you on the current market, and then you can go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the extremely small number of people that we work with each month. But either way, as Simon said, we think the long-term opportunity in Australia looks phenomenal, and that's why we are investing in this asset class. We wish you all the best on your journey.
Woo, that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Have a spin. Bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that. So nice, eh? Oh.